Yes. And it is recorded, and we will be uploading it for the people who cannot join due to time zones or double bookings. I've already had some people email me saying they will only be able to join for half an hour, but they're still very excited about it. Edward, it's really nice to see you here.
Hello.
Hi, Edward. For the LAN PKS team, Edward is part of one of our country intersectoral teams from the Global Dialogue Forum. So we're working directly with him and his team on challenges on the ground.
Lena, you can see my shared screen, right?
Yes, it's perfect.
Excellent. Okay.
Hi, Tsegaya as well, and Dr. Darwich. Haven't seen you in a long time, Dr. Darwich. Tsegaya is also part of our intersectoral team from Ethiopia.
Did we hear of any people having difficulties to register also?
No.
Okay.
But I also did send probably a bit of an annoying reminder to absolutely everyone who sent an email, again, just 10 minutes ago. So because of that issue, to make sure that everyone,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think in this day and age, you have to be annoying sometimes. Like Ken Bobia likes to say, you have to annoy them, Bernd.
I'm very good at being annoying. But yeah, curse and a blessing. Thanks, Derek. So we already have 16 people in the room, which is great, but we will definitely wait a couple more minutes just to let everyone join. Hi, Gabriel. Really happy to see you here.
Hello, Lena. Yeah, happy to be here.
Long time. Long time no see.
Yeah, I think we'll just wait a few more minutes before we start to give a few more people the chance to join us. Just maybe 2 more minutes.
Yeah, but a big thank you to everyone who's already here. I mean, I recognize some people who are in the room, but not everyone. And very excited to see you guys all here and registered and joined. Do tell us in the chat if you have access to the chat, if you had any difficulties in joining the meeting, because in our last, I'm talking to the people, to the audience right now, because last time we had some issues apparently with people joining. And so let us know in the chat if you had difficulties joining as well, because we want to make sure to make this as easy as possible, even though our regulations don't always allow us to do that. Here at
our participants management is still in the 20th century. We'll join the 21st century eventually. Yeah, but that's just because of GDPR concerns. Yeah.
Yeah. Governmental restrictions.
Yeah, I think the number of participants doesn't really increase at the moment. So I think I'll take over, Lena. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Good morning. I think it's quite early for the folks in the Americas. Maybe there are also some people who join us from further east. So then good evening. Again, welcome to our series of online seminars. This is the 9th online seminar, and the title is Land PKS, Characterizing Land Potential, a smartphone app to support land use planning, monitoring, and remote sensing validation. And this session will be recorded, so by staying, you basically agree to that. And if you're uncomfortable, you can of course keep your camera off. Just a very few housekeeping rules. If you have a question, you can use the chat box at any time, and then we will take note of it already for the Q&A session later. We kindly ask you to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And later then in the Q&A session, you can raise your hand if you want to speak. You can also keep on using the chat for questions. If possible, please switch on your camera during the Q&A session. It's just nicer. Also, if you would like to introduce yourself, please use the chat to write 1 or 2 sentences about yourself. We're always interested who is joining us and what connects you to the topic of LDN. My agenda looks very short, but then the middle part, of course, is an agenda in itself. So I'll just do some brief opening remarks about GEO-LDN before I hand over to the Land PKS team. And after the presentation, we have time for questions and answers. Yeah, so just 2 slides about GEO-LDN. It's a global network. It started about 6 years ago in 2018 by a decision of one of the conferences of the parties of the UNCCD to get support in the implementation of the convention. So that's where we're very happy about that closeness to UNCCD actually, and about that mandate we have to support them. And I just put a few logos on this map, on this world map. I'm sure there are more. So we have very strong partners in Africa, like RCMRD, CSE in West Africa, the University of Energy and Natural Resources in Ghana. Also international organizations like Conservation International, the Open Geospatial Consortium as a standardization organization. WOCAT is a very active partner, of course. the NCCD itself. So many organizations contributing to GEO-LDN. GEO-LDN is a flagship initiative of GEO, the Group on Earth Observations. Yeah, and we use this webinar series actually to, on the one hand, promote our LDN toolbox, the tools and data sets which support countries and organizations in implementing LDN, and also on the other hand to learn more from you. So it's an exchange between data providers and data users. One thing we have in mind is tools that work together well, or like Baron or likes to say, that play together well. So which are interoperable, which you can put in like a daisy chain. And just one example of what we have in mind, there are tools to measure the actual indicator, SDG indicator 1531, which Trends.Earth is very widely used as a QGIS plugin. There's also Cepal to do similar things. And then what we realize is our users want to do some sort of verification of the data in the field. Sometimes they use an analog mapping questionnaire, or they use an app like LandPKS. I believe this screenshot is a few years old from the Tools for LDN project. So data from Trans-Earth ingested and being verified on the ground. And as a next step, what often happens is that some interactive app is built for the LDN assessment to converge the evidence, to show, to include the officially created data for the reporting with some additional data sets on the ground to find the hotspots and the bright spots where land degradation happens and where maybe restoration projects also make most sense. So with these few words, just to give you a background why we host this webinar series, I'd like to hand over to the LandPKS team. So thank you very much to Laura, Derek, and Steve for being with us here today, for finding time to present LandPKS, and we're looking very forward to your presentation of the tool. So I'll stop sharing and hand over to you.
All right. Is my screen coming through okay?
It is, yes. Thank you.
All right. We will go ahead. Sorry, I'm just orienting myself to the screen sharing tools. Okay, now I'm ready. We'll go ahead and jump into our presentation then. So we're here today to talk about LandPKS, which is a mobile app to support sustainable land management. And I'm joined by some colleagues who also work on the Terrasso platform, which we'll talk a little bit about at the end of the presentation. I did also want to flag that we're joined today by Jeff Herrick, who is the founder of LandPKS, and some of you may know from his work with UNCCD, but is also with USDA ARS, who initially developed the app. So we just wanted to acknowledge that relationship as well. So I'm Laura Hamrick. I'm the program coordinator for LandPKS. And I'm joined by Steve Francis and Derek Kalin, both of whom work on Terrasso and LandPKS. And Derek will be talking at the end about some of the future development directions of the app. Steve and Derek, do you want to add anything else?
Hi, everybody. Great to see you all.
Awesome. So we'll jump right in. I believe that folks will be monitoring the chat as we go, so please put questions into the chat along the way, and we will definitely have time to get to those at the end, if not during the presentation. So a quick overview of what we will be talking about today. So I'm going to start with an explanation of the app itself, very high level, and then we'll dig into some of the tools in the app in a lot more detail. Then we'll talk about some of the use cases for the app, ways that it has been used around the world, And I see that session as more a conversation starter. There's lots of very different ways that you could use the app, and so we'd love to hear from all of you about ways that it seems like it might be useful in your work. After that, we'll do a demo of the app, and then Derek will wrap us up with exploring the future development directions of the app, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. All right, so jumping straight in. So many of you may be familiar with the concept of land potential, but I think it's a good place to start to kind of ground us all in what we're talking about today. So land potential is the inherent long-term potential, which is sort of limitations and capabilities of the land to generate ecosystem services sustainably over time. So understanding the land potential helps us make decisions about what to use or not use land for, how to manage it to prevent degradation, and so on and so forth. And so that land potential is based on soil, topography, and climate. The Land PKS is the Land Potential Knowledge System. So it's a mobile app to help you understand land potential and monitor land over time. So the goal is to support sustainable land management by letting users access knowledge about their land, collect and share their data about their land, also helping excuse me, guide them in knowing what data to collect in the first place. And if users choose so, they can contribute that data to an open global data set on our data portal. So some more specific details about the app. So it's a free mobile app on iOS and Android. It's designed for use all over the world and has also been designed for use by a wide variety of individuals, with the goal being a minimal amount of training required in order to use the app, as well as a minimal amount of equipment needed. So it's really meant to be used where you are with what you have around you. As I mentioned, there are data privacy controls, so you can choose whether your data is public or private. It's also really designed for offline use in the field. So the app is fully functional in the field. It's not going to break. You can collect the information you need without cell service. There are one or two features that won't work until you get back to cell service, but no data will be lost, or the app will continue to work properly when you're out in the field. It's available in English and Spanish and partially translated into French and Swahili. The app is really focused on providing site-specific data and analysis. So some of the tools that Bernd mentioned earlier, like SIPL or Trensa Earth, provide you with a global or regional or national sort of raster, data product. And so Land PKS really focuses on sites, which is just a pair of lat-long coordinates. And so it's not going to give you a raster prediction for all the soil ID in a country, but it can be used in really interesting ways with those other sort of regionally based tools. As I mentioned, this is the current app that we're going to be talking about for the majority of the presentation. We are rebuilding it at the moment into an app suite, so that's what Derek will talk about at the end. So just a quick overview of kind of the functionality of the app through its goals. So one of the main goals is helping users understand their land potential. So we give you access to data like soil predictions from different types of soil maps, as well as climate graphs and reports. We let you collect data about your soil and topography, and then help analyze that data along with those soil predictions in order to give you very localized predictions about what type of soil is at your very specific location. We also provide interpretations and metrics like land capability classification and available water holding capacity to further help you understand what that land, maybe should or should not be used for, or limitations for its use. So when we think about monitoring your land, there's access in the app to Trensa Earth summaries for the area around greenness and DBI, land cover and climate trends, and then we let you collect vegetation data and then provide some graphs and analysis of that data as well. And lastly, in sort of support broadly of sustainable land management, there's also access to the WOCAT SLM database in the app offline. We also do provide you with access to your data and, again, data shared by other people through our data portal. All right, so let's dive into some of the tools in more specificity. So as I mentioned, it's a site-based tool. So the first thing you'll probably want to do when you open the app is create a site. And as soon as that happens, you'll be taken to this report tab, and then you'll have access to different types of data that's automatically pulled in, like satellite imagery, climate data, vegetation trends, and those soil ID predictions that I mentioned. So for climate, you get monthly average temperature, annual precipitation, monthly average precipitation, and so on. So when it comes to soil ID, I've mentioned this a little bit briefly, but we're going to spend a little bit of time digging into what that is and why that really matters. So soil ID is really important for land management and like appropriate use of the land. And so one example here is we have a very specific example of 2 trees that were planted about 10 meters apart. And they were mapped on the same type of soil and received the same treatments. And one of them had really high productivity, one had very low productivity. And what ended up being the case was, even though they were mapped on the same soil type, they were on 2 very different types of soils in reality, one of which was very sandy and didn't hold as much water. And so that one had very low productivity. And so this is a very micro example of the importance of knowing what soil you're on. But I think if people have good data about the type of soil that they're working on for a whole region or a whole country, you can see where these types of efficiencies and benefits could really propagate to a whole area once you have good data about the type of soil that you're on. So if we dig into what this looks like in the app, as soon as you create your site, you'll get these soil ID predictions. And so each column represents a soil profile. The darkness roughly corresponds to the amount of clay in the soil. And so what will happen is you can click into each of these soil names and get a description of the soil to learn more about it and help you decide, does this sound like the soil that I'm working with here? So the base data for those predictions comes from one of 2 sources, so you can choose and flip between them to see the difference. The sort of default one is the FAO Harmonized World Soil Database, or HWSD. That's shown here on the left. And so that is, based on it's harmonized from various national and international soil data sets, and is a traditional soil map. Soil grids is a digital soil map, and so it's raster-based grid cells, and may be more appropriate to use in areas that have sparser original data from the HWSD dataset. But again, you don't have to choose one. You can flip back and forth and see how the predictions change. So as I mentioned earlier, once you get that soil ID initial set of predictions, you're going to probably want to collect some data locally at the site to improve the accuracy of those predictions. And so in the app, it'll guide you to collect different types of data. Once you do that, you can hit that Synchronize Now button. It'll run the soil algorithm and update that the ranked list of predictions there. So you can see here, when we hit that Synchronize Now button, our rank 2 goes way down the list because our collected data doesn't actually seem to resemble this one very much. So, they get re-ranked as a result of that. So digging into the actual type of data that's collected. So the first one is slope. And so it's pretty straightforward. You've got your slope shape that you can collect. So downslope and cross slope, is it concave or convex or linear? And then you can choose from either the drawings of the slope steepness, or you can use the slope meter, which uses the accelerometer in the phone. You can line it up with the horizon, as Jeff is demonstrating well in this GIF, and hit that lock button to save the slope that you find. So next is soil texture. And so you'll do this at a variety of depths throughout the soil, depending on how deep you want to dig your soil pit. And if you are a trained soil scientist, great, you can click this drop down and put your soil in directly. But if you don't happen to be a trained soil scientist, you can click this Guide Me button and it'll walk you through a set of questions that have animated images if you click these question marks to help you know what type of soil you're working with. So what this actually looks like in the field is you start by digging your soil pit, then separate out your soil samples by depth and remove any large debris or rocks. And then you'll go through that questionnaire for each of those samples and conduct the tests. So for example, here we're asking the question, does this form a ball? The answer is yes. So then we move on to, okay, does it form a ribbon? And if so, how long is that ribbon? So once you do all of those questions, you get a result, in this case, sandy loam. You hit use that texture and it's going to save that data for you. And you do this for all of the depths. So next we have soil color. And so again, if you happen to have one of these handy Munsell books with you and you know how to use it, you can just enter that data directly. But if you don't, you can use just the smartphone, the camera on your smartphone and a color reference. So the most commonly easily accessible one is probably the 3M yellow Post-it note. And what you'll basically do is, again, separate your samples out, and then go ahead and choose the reference that you'd like to use. So there's YBAL, camera tracks, and the Post-it note that are all available. And then you'll take your photo with the soil and the reference color. And then you will tap in the photo to select this is the Post-it note, and this is the soil, or this is the YBAL card, and this is the soil. And it will then give you your color calibrated result. And so basically what the reference does is it lets us correct for, oh, you're inside, so there's really yellow light, or you're outside and it's really, blue light. So it's trying to get to that true color of the soil. So in summary, to get your soil ID predictions that are hyper-localized to your particular site, you start by creating that site, you get your initial predictions, and then you collect slope, soil texture, soil color, and note whether there are any vertical cracks in the soil. Once you synchronize that data, your predictions get updated. So we have much longer videos. They're not long videos, but we have many more resources on our website for understanding how to do this soil ID process. And so you can check that out on our website if you're looking to implement this in the field. All right, so that's soil ID, which is, of course, crucial for understanding your land potential. We can also, there's a couple tools and metrics that we can use to understand land cover and land use at a site. So first thing is you can use this simple graphical interface to track your land cover, so forest, shrubland, grassland, savanna, etc., and whether there's any grazing happening, and if so, what type of grazing it is. Then you can also determine your land capability classification. So if you're not familiar with this metric, it's a rating from 1 to 8, where 1 means there are almost no limitations on what you can do in terms of you can plant lots of different plants there. You can use it for pretty much whatever you want. 8 means it probably shouldn't be used for fear of the land degrading. And so it really just takes a couple simple user observations in the field to get this rating. And so, for example, a 4SD means there's severe limitations on the type of agriculture that can be done there due to the depth of the soil. And we have this interpretation information in the app directly, so you can figure that out while you're out in the field. If you are familiar with LCC, I did want to note that we don't include climate as a limiting factor, but that's the only difference between this and sort of traditional LCC. So the data that you need to determine your LCC, soil texture and slope are 2 of them. We've already covered how to do that. So then the last one is the data on the soil limitation screen, which I mentioned this first one is helpful for soil ID as well. The rest of them, is there salt? Is there flooding? How much lime does it require? If you fill all of that out, it will generate a complete LCC ranking for you. And then one of the unique features to our app is that you can then modify that LCC rating depending on the local crop production system or other local considerations. So in this case, we have, strong limitations on agriculture due to the soil depth. But let's say in this region, that the primary crop has a very shallow rooting depth, and so that's not really a concern for your particular use case. So then you can toggle off that particular limiting factor, and now we get it re-ranked to a 3, and the limitation is now due to soil water storage capacity. So that's LCC and land use. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the vegetation monitoring tools in the app. So we have some standardized methodology that you can use to gather information about cover class, height, basal, canopy gap, and species richness. It can be done pretty rapidly in the field once you are used to the process and understand the vegetation in the area. You can get it done in about as quick as 20 minutes per site per visit. And I did want to note that the methods that we use are compatible with the national methods used in the US and Mongolia and quite comparable to many other countries. And the goal there being that you can compare your data to those data sets because they're using similar methods. So essentially what you'll be doing is walking 4 transects at a site and dropping a yardstick 5 times and collecting 5 data points each time on that yardstick. So 5 times 5 times 4 is 100 points per site per visit. And so the first thing you can do when you're thinking about vegetation monitoring is we do have the Trends.Earth data that we pull in for NDVI and things like that. And so you can use that to get a good sense of the historical sort of vegetation history of an area. In terms of supplies, all you really need is that yardstick or meter stick or a stick that is a meter long and has 5 notches on it equally spaced. And then like a small metal pin or a blade of grass that you can drop and identify what is it hitting, every time I drop the pin. Is it hitting, rock? Is it hitting bare ground? Is it hitting a tree? So on and so forth. And so then you pick your transect and go out and mark exactly what it is that you're finding at each location. So this is kind of what it looks like in the field. Easiest to do with a partner, and you're just calling out what it is that you're seeing with that pin when you drop it. So once you've done that and collected the data, right away in the field, you're going to get some summary graphs showing, vegetation height distribution, cover class distribution, and so on and so forth. And so if you do that over time, you will also get these trend graphs generated as well to show the changes seasonally or annually that you're noting at that site. So a couple other features of Land PKS I wanted to highlight. We do have that WOCAT SLM database embedded in here and available offline. And so it's a slimmed down version of the database. And so we picked 110 technologies that had pretty robust support. And you can then filter it by the data that you collect about your site. So you can filter it by the soil texture or the slope or the cover, land cover, for example. And so there are also links to the WOCAT database from the app. So once you're back and have access to data, you can read much more about them. But it is available offline in the field, which is really nice if you're, out there working with someone who's trying to figure out what technologies or techniques to use on their property. You can use this to kind of quickly sort through them. So there's also a toolbox in the app, which lets you have direct access to that texture guide or color tool or the slope meter just without having to create a site. We also do have that data portal I mentioned, so you can export any public data site, which is all of the red dots in this image. I think we have over 40,000 public sites now, or any private sites as well as a CSV file. You can also browse through all of the data in the web browser as well. So I mentioned this earlier, we have really extensive training materials on our website. So if you're looking to implement this in the field at all, I would highly encourage doing that or reaching out to us as well for training. We're very happy to help. So now let's pivot to talking a little bit about how people have used the app around the world. or ways that you could use it that may be particularly relevant to the folks on this call. So I think Baron mentioned this one a little bit already in the intro, which is great. And so for LDN reporting and verification, this app can be used in tandem with those other data product tools like Seeple or Trends.Earth to sort of ground truth remote sensing data products about land cover or vegetation to go out there and verify what it is that is actually on the ground at that site. And so the other thing I wanted to mention is I did mention that the methods are compatible with those used nationally in the US. I did want to flag that there's a 100,000 point data set available using those compatible vegetation methods. So even if you're not in the US, it may still be useful to you as comparable data or training data or things like that. So just wanted to flag that. And I think Jeff will talk a little bit about this at the end as well. So land use planning, I know we have at least one person from Ethiopia on the call, so that's exciting. So we have worked with the Ethiopian Ministry of Agriculture in the past for the purpose of land use planning, using land PKS to support land use planning. And so they've currently trained over 500 folks in collecting LCC data, specifically with land PKS, in support of regional and national land use planning efforts. And then lastly, the app is very useful in land restoration work in kind of all phases of it. So it's been used this way in Kenya on the Lewa Conservancy and Gravy Zebra Trust. And so if you're thinking about the restoration process, so the planning phase, it could be useful if you, for example, have limited resources and only can pick 1 or 2 sites to do restoration work on. You could evaluate the soil at a couple locations, look at the sort of plant communities associated with that soil, water holding capacity, things like that, and try to pick the site that has the greatest restoration potential. When you're actually conducting the project, of course, the vegetation tracking is very helpful for monitoring the progress of the project and assessing at what point you've sort of hit your restoration goals. And then lastly, it can also be used in the evaluation phase if you've already conducted restoration projects and are really not quite sure why this one succeeded very well and this one didn't. That's another case where getting a good soil ID can really help explain some of those differing restoration outcomes. So now we will switch to the app demo. And so I have a recorded video and then I'll just talk over it, but I also have my phone connected. So if anyone has specific requests at the end, we can do a live demo as well. So let me get this going. So once you get the app downloaded, we'll go ahead and open that up. So I've already created a bunch of sites and you can create a new site here at the top using this button, or you can pop over to the map at the bottom, drop a pin, and then create a site directly from the map as well. And so you'll just have to give your site a unique name. And then you'll notice this privacy toggle here at the bottom. By default, it's set to public. So the privacy is turned off because we do encourage people to contribute their data if they want to. In this case, I'm turning it to private because the data I'm about to enter is all fake. And so I don't want to put inaccurate data into the database. So once you save your site, it's going to go ahead and pull that FAO HWSD data as well as soil grids and generate some soil predictions for you. And so anything with a little green leaf means that there's new information available there. So to start under land info, we can open that up and take a look at the different soil predictions that have been generated. So you'll see at the top, you toggle between FAO, HWSD, or soil grids. Once you get some data collected, you can swap between whether your ranking is based on your data or GPS or a combination. At the moment, of course, we don't have any data collected, so it's just going to be the sort of, this is what we predict based on your geographic location only. And so you can see one of these is a really shallow soil. The rest of these tend to have more clay content. And so it might be pretty easy to distinguish between at least the first one and ranks 2 through 4 to figure out which of these might be what we're actually looking at. You can also look at it by rock fragment as well as texture. And again, there are these page descriptions for each of them that you can go into to read about management considerations and look at the soil property tables as well. All right, and so basically once you take a look at that, take a look at some of the textures, maybe you still don't really know what you're on, so let's go collect the data in the data input tab here at the top in order to refine our predictions a little bit better. So this land info section is where most of the data collection is going to happen for soil ID. I figure we might as well start by collecting some of that land cover data just while we're doing this. That does not feed into the soil ID, but is pretty straightforward and easy to do. The slope, you can, again, click those images or use that slope meter. And you can either hold it up to the horizon or lay it down on like a yardstick, meter stick on the ground to try to get an accurate slope reading. And once you lock that in, you should be set. And then for slope shape, of course, the left side is the downslope curvature and the right side here is the cross slope curvature. So you can just track those quickly. And then we'll go in and do soil texture. So again, if you know your soil texture, you can just select it quickly, put in your rock fragment volume and be on your way. But if you're less familiar, you can use that tutorial and it'll walk you through, does it form a ball? And so on and so forth. Oh, throat is getting dry, sorry. So you've got the ball test, then you're going to see if it forms a ribbon, figure out how long that ribbon is. And so by going through this process, eventually you're going to get one of the soil texture classes. And then I'll just rapidly enter those kind of for the rest of the depths, just so that we have some workable data to move on from. So I'll skim through that. So next is soil color. So you can take a photo or upload a photo. So I have some pre-taken photos with those 3M Post-it notes that I'll be using. And so again, you just tap the reference, tap the soil, and then it's going to give you that color prediction or color assessment. So I'm very rapidly going to do this one as well. Skim a little bit forward. There we go. So once you've collected all of your soil color and texture data, it's still not showing the updated predictions. So the reason for that, and you can tell also because this input bar is still yellow, you have to go up to the top and hit that Synchronize Now button. And so this is one of the features that does require cell data service in order to function, which is the soil ID ranking. And so once you do that, you just have to toggle away and back to get it to update. And then you'll notice that there is a change in those rankings based on the data that we've collected here. So it's a deeper soil and has more clay content. So that first one is looking like it's not very likely. So it moves down the ranking order. And so at this point, of course, you've gotten a little bit more familiar with the soil. You could come in here and read the descriptions again and just double check and then select the one that you think is your actual soil. And then that will get recorded in the database as the soil for that location. So that's soil ID. The next thing is once you collect texture data, you can get your available water holding content estimations. And those do depend on the organic matter in the soil. And so you can move this slider just to try to get that to the correct amount to get a better estimation of your AWC. Next, you have the land capability classification, which you'll notice is already partially filled out because we've already collected some texture and slope data. There are still some incompletes showing up. And so if you click on these question marks next to them, it'll tell you where to find that data input. In this case, they're all, the ones that are left are all in this soil limitations section. So we can quickly say, okay, there's no salt, rare flooding, large amounts of lime required, so on and so forth. So once we get this filled out, this should be all that we need to get a full LCC report. And you'll notice this does not need to be synchronized. This works fine offline. And so you get that immediate result as well of that 4 SDs. You can come in and read what exactly that means. And again, let's say this is one of those cases where there's shallow rooting depth plants that'll be planted. So you may want to toggle off that soil depth limitation, and then you get your updated ranking up here. So next, below that, we have just a summary of the data you've entered so far. And if you want to share this with people, you can also hit that PDF report button at the bottom, generate PDF report, and then that's going to generate just a nice little PDF you could share with your collaborators to quickly summarize all the data that has been gathered so far. Okay, so that is the land info section. It's a big one. So at the bottom, we have climate data. This just gets automatically pulled. There's no sort of interactive piece to this other than just coming in and looking at the data to get a better sense of the land that you're on. And so the last big section is vegetation. So this one, you'll notice the imagery may take a while to load just to pull that stuff from Transat Earth. So what we can do is if we collect vegetation data, it will like immediately update and show us the cover class, vegetation height, those different data reports immediately. That does not require being online. So again, here we've got that yardstick that you drop on the ground, and then you're just going to go through and tap on the cover classes that you note at that site. So that first white box at the top was bare ground. The rest of these, we're going to say there's some perennial grasses, herbaceous litter, woody litter, so on. And you track the height of the vegetation, as well as whether there's a basal gap, canopy gap, and any species counts. This piece is not required, but of course, if you do end up tracking that data, you do get summaries for all of that data as well. So I'm very rapidly going to fill out this whole section. And it's done. And so now we can go back and take a look at that summary report under the vegetation section, and you'll see this new dated dropdown that shows up. If we click on that, all of those nice reports that I showed earlier are now showing up for our site right away. And so, of course, if you do enter multiple data points, you will get those trend graphs as well. I believe yep, here we are. So you get this cover trends section, and then it'll show you those reports over time. And then lastly, as well, this is an example of if the vegetation, when the vegetation imagery and data does load, you get these nice Transat Earth data graphs, land cover, precipitation, and DBI, and so on and so forth. And so the last section to talk about is that WOCAT database. Once again, you just hit filter with land data, land info data. So our site is forest, clay loam, and gentle slopes. And so then it's going to show us some of those technologies or techniques that would be appropriate for that location. And those green buttons will take us out to that WOCAT site to take a look at the longer descriptions of each of those techniques. So you can also filter by, I'm concerned about wind erosion or water erosion, and it'll filter those techniques based on the sort of degradation of concern. And then lastly, we have that tools section that I mentioned, where you can take a look at, that texture guide if you need a quick reference, and so on and so forth. So I think that is it for the demo. Thank you all. And so I'm going to pass it off to Derek for talking about what's coming next.
Lovely. Thank you, Laura. So hi, everybody. My name is Derek Kalin. I'm the product manager for Land PKS at Tech Matters. Obviously, the app has been a huge success over time, and we're part of the team that's building an iteration upon it. We're building on the successes of Land PKS by redesigning it in a modern framework, adding a few features, making it easier to use. Next slide, please. So why are we doing this? Well, Land PKS obviously is very powerful and has a lot of use cases. Over time, however, the infrastructure on which it is built has aged. So what we've done is adopted a modern app framework, which allows for faster development and hopefully will help us facilitate a better user experience. So additionally, we're making a bunch of updates that are possible with a total design refresh. We're splitting the app into multiple apps so that each experience can be simplified and tailored for a single specific purpose. We're using best-in-class usability design principles and including even more content for non-soil scientists. So the sum of it is the new LandPS suite is going to provide an even better experience and be even more accessible to people. Next slide, please. So one of the most requested features for LandPKS is to organize the collection of data among teams and with specific predetermined sites. The updated version of LandPKS will allow teams to work together to gather data with specific requirements like depth intervals or specific properties that are needed. And in this way, we believe that teams of people will be able to gather data more effectively. We're also working on the soil ID experience. So the soil ID algorithm will provide predictions based on soil maps and steadily improve those recommendations at a site over time with guidance to the user about what inputs would be most helpful to narrow down the results. And we've made it possible to absorb quite a bit of technical information in a very simple way. So we're hoping to make soil identification simpler for everyone from soil scientists to farmers and ranchers and many more. So as a note, part of this reboot is that LandPKS is joining a suite of tools developed by the Terrasso project. So Terrasso is another tool set developed by Tech Matters for people who are trying to organize at a landscape or a community level to gather and share data, visualize it for analysis or for storytelling. And so while LandPKS is going to be a standalone application, we believe that users will get additional benefits by sharing the information with their colleagues and community members. As a side note, Terrasso, which is the tech platform for the 1,000 Landscapes for 1 Billion People initiative, is organized around the integrated landscape management framework. And when we were exploring GEO-LDN, we were pleased to see the similarities between this framework and LDN's integrated land use planning cycle. A focus on planning, acting, and learning from those actions informs the tools that we've built and the approaches that we support in Terrasso. So we thought we'd call that out. So what's next? We're planning to launch the US version of Soil ID soon, later this year, with global versions quick to follow. And we're going to continue to build out the current LandPKS functionality into new apps, like a land monitoring app. So as we progress, fundraising is still ongoing, and we will continue to develop the app suite. We've already received the support from various US government actors and are in conversations with international groups interested in sustainable land management. So we're always looking for additional supporters, especially for scenarios where we're customizing the app for specific regions or specific contexts. And with that, I think that's my last slide. Back over to you, Laura.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I guess if you're interested, some things that you can do after this presentation, we do have a newsletter on our website at landpotential.org that you can sign up on to stay up to date with any new developments in building the new set of apps. We will keep you updated through that. And if you're interested in applying this right away in a context that you're working in, definitely download the app, try it out, let us know if you need any training, and let us know as you play with it what works for you or what features you'd really like to see that are not currently present. We are always interested to hear from anyone using the app, and so you can reach out to us at contact@landpotential.org to connect. We are also interested, of course, in always trying to connect our data to other decision support tools. And so if you happen to be doing anything related to that, we would welcome, partnership and discussion with those folks. So again, please feel free to reach out to us. I do just want to thank all of our collaborators who have worked on this. I know, I believe someone called out in the app, some of the folks who have worked with us, in the chat, not the app, folks who have worked with us before, and our many funders as well, and supporters. So at this point, I did want to pass it off to Jeff Herrick briefly to highlight some of the work that one of our primary partners, the Jornada, has done around topics I think that are of similar interest to the work done by folks in this group. So Jeff, I will let you hop in.
Great, thanks, Laura. Yeah, and just before we jump to the Jornada, I just wanted to note this is a ton of information. That was amazing and great job, Laura. But you know, a lot of folks are just using LandPKS for the toolbox function. You can go down to the bottom and where she showed the little hammer. And if all you want to do is use it to just help determine texture, you can use it for that. Or if you just want to use it to help determine color, you can use it for that. So it can be really a very simple tool, even though it's got a lot of complexity and a lot of aspects. But everything that Laura demonstrated can be used by itself, and you don't have to go through all of those screens to do that. So back to the Jornada. One of the unique things about LandPKS, like WOCAT actually, is that it was started by an academic institution. So in the case of WOCAT, it's ETH in Bern in Switzerland. With LandPKS, it was started with the USDA's Agricultural Research Service in Las Cruces, New Mexico. So the southwestern United States. This is an institution that's been around for well over 100 years now, initially to look at the issues of land degradation in the southwestern US. We had some pretty dramatic land degradation that occurred with overgrazing, very similar to what's occurring in many parts of the world today. And this research station was specifically set up to address overgrazing. Next, please. We work on a number of different issues, generally at the national to global scale. The one that is relevant here is the one right at the top of the ring, land health knowledge systems. And you can see that there are a number of networks and so forth. The Landscape Data Commons, we're trying to make data available globally using common data collection methods, and a number of others. Next, please. So I think what's probably most relevant here is the work that the Jornada is doing, and the scientists, there are 10 PhD level scientists at the Jornada, to link monitoring with research and models to ultimately support land management. So how do we take these data and make them useful at scales from the individual field or pasture all the way up to continental and even global scales? And so what you're seeing here is the development of standard methods, and these are actually the same or compatible methods that are included in the LandPKS app that have been used then to collect data across more than 85,000 locations in the United States and a number in Mongolia and other countries as well. There's been some use in Argentina and elsewhere. These are then used to, together with some more limited wind erosion network sites, these are heavily instrumented sites, to drive models and calibrate and validate these models and generate predictions of things like wind erosion for sand and dust storms, again, relevant to the convention. And then used together with satellite imagery to actually create wall-to-wall or continuous coverage and prediction of these indicators. And again, these are tools that could easily be applied globally. And in fact, there are some discussions now on how these might be able to be used globally. Next, please. And that's it. Thanks.